Well, welcome everybody to the Growing Money with Sean Trace podcast. I have a really awesome guest with me today. Would you like to tell people who you are and a little bit about what you do?
Sure. I'm Shannah Game, and I love, we got the Shannah thing here going
Right?
on. I am a certified financial planner, a certified trauma of money specialist, and I've hosted a podcast called Everyone's Talkin' Money for the last, almost 10 years.
That's awesome.
And I have a new book coming out in February called Unraveling Your Relationship with Money. And I love to talk about the topics around money that most people don't like to touch.
Why do you think I'm going to tap into that? Because I have my list of questions, but I want to ask you, why do you think people don't like to touch some of those questions?
I think when we talk about money, it's easy to kind of put it in this box or container of here are the things that you should be doing with your money, right?
Yeah.
Follow the list, check the items, put money in retirement, save money, don't spend more than you have. But the problem is we still have this, it's like this messiness around money, and
Yeah.
people aren't achieving the things that they want. They're not getting to the place that they want. And stress is getting more and more and more around money, anxiety, everything's getting worse. So it's like, well, we can't just talk about those steps and those things to do because it's not fixing the issue. So I like to say that other money experts talk about what to do, and I like to talk about why you're not doing those things that are going to help you get to where you want to be.
I love that. Well, it's interesting that we also there's this the psychological intersection with money, because we have like the higher brain that's like, I want to lay down the rules, I want to chart my course, but then we have that part of ourselves that wants to do stupid stuff, like ooh, love these purple, rainbow, bunny ears. Like, I need to get these. I mean, I'm thinking about my daughter right now. She sees the weirdest stuff and she's like, I need it. And you're like, no, 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 no. We don't need that. Oh, but I do. And every one of us has that weird purchase that you sit there and years later you look at it going, what was I thinking? And the funny thing is it's like, we're messy at times and we don't want to admit it. We all would like to
Yes.
say, if I could follow this line and do these things, success is guaranteed. But then you wake up one day and you're like, wow, what did I do last night? What did I spend last night? So there is this balance with messiness. I love that.
And I like that you talk about it with messiness. My take is that we don't allow enough messiness.
Oh,
That we, as a society, tend to shame and blame around those, crazy purple rainbow bunny ears, rather than saying, hey, like, this is part of the human experience. We're going to color outside of the lines. We're going to do things different. Money is personal. And I think that there's not enough of that actually allowed or even promoted, that people should have the freedom to spend money on some crazy things that somebody else might think is the most ridiculous expense, and us not feel some sort of guilt over that. I think it's the guilt and the shame that actually is causing like the almost like the reverb action of us
yeah.
trying to go in the other direction so hard that we end up just going back in the same direction, right?
Yeah.
And so it's creating this ripple effect that people feel like they have to be perfect around money. And I can tell you, I have worked for 20 years with people. I have seen people who make $20 million, who make $20,000 a year, every iteration in between. We all make the same mistakes. We all have the same issues around money. We all have the same thoughts around money, but it's just not vocalized in that way. And so I think, especially in this social media culture, we want to really highlight the people who have paid off all the debt, who have, $1 million business and all of these big, glorious, and they are great achievements around money. But I think we should also celebrate the messiness.
Yeah.
And I think if we did that more around money, there would be more permission for us to be messy and for it to actually be okay.
Yeah. Well, there was some. I love that you talk about how things are personalized because, as I'm not a money expert. I am a dad who started a podcast because I was going through graduate school, doing my MBA, and I was like, dove into my MBA because I wanted to learn about money and business, and all of a sudden I realized this isn't
Wrong.
teaching me anything.
No.
This is just, there's nothing in here. I love it. I loved what I learned, but it wasn't. So I started like going, well, I want to talk to people who do know, and it is very different. But you're spot on. There is this like, this is the way you must do this. You must crush this. You must live this stark reality. And I was like, hang on, do you have to do it this way, or is there another way? Is there and like my wife and my daughter and I on Saturday night, my wife and I were really tired. I've been working a lot lately, and she looked at me. She's like, should we do massage? And I live in Southeast Asia. Like, I actually am in Vietnam. And so massage
Wow.
is actually much more affordable than it is in the States. But we found this nice spa up the street, and they had, was it $20 massages for 90 minutes, which is amazing, And
Yeah.
so we
Sign
got
me
in,
up.
right? And so we booked it for us, and then we were like, you know what? We don't have anyone to watch our daughter tonight. Well, let's just bring her. And and here it was. We were sitting there, and there was, while I was sitting down, I was sitting there. Like, part of me was like, is this extravagant? Should we be doing this? Is this the right thing to do? But when we walked out, and all of us were just super relaxed, and my daughter was like, she's 8 years old, and she just had a 90-minute massage, and she looked at us, and she's like, that was amazing. And we were like, and just
Yes.
her face was bliss, and we were like, okay, yeah, that was a good idea,
Right.
But it was unique for us, and like, it was something that we valued. My wife and I both love getting body work because we work really hard, and we want to take care of ourselves as well. It was a unique thing for us, but I felt that guilt, and I was just like, am I doing something wrong right now?
I mean, there's so many layers that we can go in with that. I think
Right.
the first one is the am I doing something wrong? We can watch TV, we can read blogs, even listen to other podcasts. There are other money experts out there that talk about all the things you're doing wrong. And so we're just programmed to think that our choices are wrong. Like, that is our
Yeah.
first thought pattern around money, and it takes so much effort to change that. But I think that the second thing that I want to talk about with that, that you bring up is such a good point that, a lot of times people will tell me my biggest fear, in fact, I would say probably 99% of the people say my biggest fear around money is there's never enough.
Yeah.
And so I push back on that and say, okay, well, do you know what enough is? Like, what does that look like? Is it a dollar amount? Is it having 90-minute massages? What is your version of enough? Because until you can actually define it, you don't know if you've actually gotten there. So you're always going to feel like there's never enough, right?
Yeah.
And the same thing around wealth. It's this big, lofty word. But what does it actually mean for you? What does it look like? Like, you live in Southeast Asia, what probably was a very purposeful choice.
Yeah.
My guess would be you have probably a much better quality of life than we have here in the United States. Just an assumption. But you made that choice, and that to you is your version of living a wealthy life, right?
Yeah.
And so I think there's just not enough talk about getting to choose these things and getting to choose these meanings for your life, and then being okay with what that looks like. Like, if enough for you is, hey, we want to go every month and have 90-minute massages, beautiful, right? Then we can start like the sort of mental, almost like deprogramming of those thoughts of like, am I doing something wrong? They don't even enter into the equation, because it's like, well, of course we're doing something right, because this is our version of enough. Like, this is what we want life to look like.
I love that. Well, let me spin it back to the trauma question. Like, what made you want to write a book about money trauma? What was the catalyst that said, hey, this needs to be written? And I mean, sometimes books come from weird places. My book I'm writing? I'm actually writing a book right now with my daughter
Oh,
And it's
cool.
about the zombie apocalypse and personal finance for tweens. Because
Love it.
all of these money concepts are framed through like different lessons in the zombie apocalypse. And we are having a blast writing it. And the reason I felt motivated was because no one had done it. But why are you writing your book about, why did you write your book about money trauma and your new book as well?
I have wanted to write a book for probably like 20 years, and I have been
Nice.
approached many times, but I did not want to write a traditional money book. I did not want to write, here's how you budget, here's how you save, here's how you
Right?
invest. There are a ton of those books out there.
Yeah.
There's many, many great ones that I can recommend, but that's not me, and that's not my version of how I, sort of fill this void around personal finance. And like I said, I've worked with hundreds and hundreds of people over 20 years, and I've really seen this emotional and psychological component around money being the key, like, secret ingredient, if you will, to actually creating change with their money situation. And so for me, I became deeply interested in not only my own relationship with money that's been super rocky, even though I am a money expert, but also how to help other people. So I started to develop little tools and exercises and different ways to kind of unlodge them from their way of thinking and doing things, almost as an experiment to see like, oh, hey, could this actually change something? So it started working.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, there's something to this. So my book, Unraveling Your Relationship with Money, is really just a collection of my story around my relationship with money and other people's stories. And my hope is that you can see yourself in one of these stories and that it starts to change how you think about money, but more importantly, how you interact with it, right? So you don't go have that 90-minute massage and immediately be filled with, should I be doing this? Is this the right thing, right? And so it's really like cracking open, I like to say like an egg, because
Yeah.
most people have never thought about money from this perspective. And so I really want the book to just be this gentle, yet humorous, yet interesting way for you to just tap a little bit into this concept of trauma, that there could be trauma around money, and the psychological, emotional impacts of money, because it is messy, it is irrational, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
But I just don't want people to constantly live in a place of fear and regret and shame and blame around money. And, I have talked to so many people who have, been in their 90s and, approaching the end of their life. And they always tell me, you know what, if I could go back, I hope I would have realized that it wasn't about the money, that it
Mm.
was really about my emotions, changing my definition around wealth, looking at money from a different lens, not having it consume my entire being or my self-worth. Like, I've heard so many of those statements over and over again. So I'm like, okay, there's got to be something to this. Let me just write my little slice of this
Yeah.
pie and hope it resonates with people.
I love that. Well, one of the things that I keep coming back to with money is like, money is this super powerful tool, but people see it as the tool that can fix the problems in their life, and
Mm,
sometimes like we have problems because we don't have tools, and it might not just be money that we don't have, it might be other tools that we don't have to cope. I have a family member who is quite down lately, and they're like, I feel really depressed. And I was like, you're not depressed. Your finances are not where they should be. It's a financial issue. I'm not trying to minimize what they're going through, but yet I know that when they are visiting other people another family member, and they're able to stay there at the other people's house, and it's large and there's enough food and there's enough stuff in the house, that person suddenly brightens up. But when they go back to their
mm,
place and there's just this constant lack that they're dealing with, and again, there's absolutely no judgment around that. I know
sure.
that. I know that battle. I know that journey. I've been there. But I see how that money trauma begins to show up. Like, what are some other ways that money trauma starts to show up in our daily lives? And why don't we talk about this more?
That is the $1,000,000 question, Sean.
Right?
It shows up in lots of different ways. You know, I think sometimes when we use the word trauma, it feels like, ooh, that's a big, scary word. But
Yeah.
trauma comes from lots of different places, right? It could come from maybe we forgot to pay a bill, right? And we
Right,
have
right.
like shamed ourselves for so many years about that. Or we got laid off from our job. Or there might have been, you know, financial abuse in a relationship. Or we might have grown up, yeah, not having a lot of money. Or we might have grown up having a lot of money and we don't
Yeah.
have that anymore, right? But also it comes generationally. So this is a piece we don't talk about enough, is that your financial DNA has been passed down from all the generations before you. So if we think about Great Depression, we think about just conflict, not enough, I mean, you know, women's rights, like so many different things if we look back through the years, all of those stories and those imprints have been put inside of us,
Yeah.
right? Without us really consciously being aware of it. So sometimes the trauma, I know this is a little out there for some people, but sometimes the trauma actually might not be ours.
Yeah,
It
yeah,
might
yeah.
be coming from a different generation, but for some reason it's impacting us and our lives today. So there are lots of different ways, big ways, small ways that trauma can show up. And like you said, it masks as other things, as depression or not sleeping well or relationship difficulties or things like that. And you're right, it's about getting to the root of what is actually really going on and is there something we can do about it?
Yeah. Well, and I think that people, and if anybody doubts that, you can pass stuff on through genetics, like, man, look up twin studies. Look up
Right.
these things where, people are separated at birth, and then they look at, and they grew up these parallel lives with a twin that was separated. I look at it. I have a family member that's adopted. And when she finally met her birth family, she realized that there was the same traumas, there was the same things that these people were all dealing with. And when they talked about it, they realized it was all the stuff that their mother had dealt with, their birth mother.
Wow.
And they were all talking about this. And like this person, my family member just was like, this is wild, because I've been dealing with all this stuff that I thought was my trauma. And what I'm finding out now, it had nothing to do with me. And I thought that I was dealing with it. And you don't realize how strong those things. I have this one trauma, and it's not a money trauma, but it still sticks with me. I was in front of a group of people at a martial arts convention type thing with all these people that I really looked up to. And my teacher's wife, her name was Nayla. And I had just met her, even though I knew my teacher. And I stood up in front of people, and I was like, I wanted to, get to know everyone. And I stood up and I said, I just wanted to say, I spoke with Nayla before, and her name's Nayla. And she pulled me aside afterwards, and she's like, Sean, my name is Nayla. And I just, even thinking about that now, I still get this. And you're so spot on. Like, there's these memories of well, where did that money go? What happened to it? Or a parent saying, did you lose that? Or there's all these little things that might have happened that, that trauma sticks with you. Whether it's small or large, it sticks with you. And it's not fun. How can we start moving uncovering these things so that we can see it and work with it?
You brought up something good when you talked about that. You clenched your fist and you talked about that feeling, right?
Yeah.
Part of unraveling money trauma is recognizing where it shows up in our body. So
Oh,
if we look at, let's say, our banking app on our phone and we feel, oh my gosh, like my heart is racing, my
yeah.
shoulders are getting
Right?
tight, My body's clenching. Okay, well, there might be something for me to investigate here. What's going on? Why do I feel this way? Why is this happening? Or if you're having a conversation with somebody and it comes to money and suddenly you feel like you want to like run out the door as fast as possible.
Yeah.
Okay, let's look at that fight or flight response. What is going on underneath? So I think it's two parts. It's recognizing the different situations, people, experiences where we start to feel those somatic, those body responses. And then the second piece is investigating. So it's like bringing a level of curiosity to what is going on. What is
Yeah.
underneath this? Why am I feeling this way? When I look at my bank app and I feel nervous, do my parents look at their bank app and feel nervous? Like, am I mimicking a behavior, or has something happened to me in the past? So it's really bringing this level of curiosity, no judgment, and trying to understand what is beneath this. And once we can start to understand, like, oh, remember 2 years ago when I forgot to pay that bill and I suddenly felt like a failure and my credit score dropped, and every time I look at my bank app, I feel that's going to happen again, right? So, okay, we need to do some work around that experience. So it's bringing this kind of self-love to it. But because we don't think about money this way, most of us go through life experiencing money with, yeah, clenched fists, clenched jaw, clenched legs, heart rate racing, sweating, all sorts of crazy responses. But we just don't make the connection like, ooh, there's probably something going on here that I should at least investigate.
Right. Well, that makes me think of like, because we're taught like, and I'm not hating on this. This is something that I am using, and these are tools that I am working on myself. But, budgeting and saving, they are like, two ninja swords that people can use to attack their financial problems. But sometimes those don't just solve most people's money problems. Them by themselves don't always fix everything. Why not?
I think it's because we can write whatever we want on a piece of paper.
Right.
We can write whatever numbers we want to believe on a piece of paper. So I tend to teach budgeting a little bit different. I like to call it a spending plan, which feels a little bit more aspirational. And you've got to not only be able to look at what you're forecasting, you've got to also be able to look at what actually happened in that month, right? That's the reality check. And when we compare and contrast those things, we can see, oh, there's patterns, or, oh, this is interesting. And then we have choices. Either, okay, I'm okay spending this way, or no, I want to make a change, right? It puts us in more of a place of control. But we don't like the reality check. Like, the reality check is like, ooh, that's the scary part. But that's where the magic lives. But we have to couple that with this work around our relationship with money. So if we are constantly, this is something we all do, like overspend eating out, right? Like we think we're going to spend a certain amount. We tell ourselves it's that amount. It's never that amount.
Yeah.
We always go over. But we don't actually want to think about, okay, let me make a conscious choice. Intentionally, is this what I want to spend eating out? Now, the answer could absolutely be yes. But it could also be, you know what? I don't, because I have another money goal that is super important to me. And I'm going to be intentional, and I'm going to actually set some boundaries and change my behavior, right? So there's this whole like sort of pattern, almost, you talked about dominoes, almost like a domino effect that needs to happen around us just writing numbers on a piece of paper. And so this is the reason why people hate budgeting. This is the reason why it doesn't work for most people. It's missing honesty, which is the reality check, but it's missing an intentionality of us looking at it and feeling like, oh, I'm actually in control of this. I can decide what I want and what I don't want to some degree. Obviously, there are certain things we have to pay, but I can actually be in control of this. And the way I do that is by having some awareness over, like, what are my triggers? What are the things that, we talked about enough? Like, what are the things I actually want to spend my money on? What are my values? Like, create the story and the system around this so that when you go to the numbers on the piece of paper, that actually works.
Yeah. I had there was this one thing that I caught myself doing the other day, and I was like, oh, and I was like, that's deep. That's deep. That's a deep-seated thing. I was wanting to buy something that I didn't need to buy. Most definitely. It was one of those things. And I sat there and I started just mentally working through it. And I started just asking myself, like, why do I want this? And I heard this little voice in my head, because I didn't get to have it when I was younger. And I was like, oh,
Yes.
right there. Hang on. Hello. Hello, friend.
Right.
And I just like started talking to that little part of myself, like, well, why do you want it? Well, because I didn't get to have that stuff, because I feel like I deserve it. And then I just started thinking about it, and it started cracking me up. And I just was like, well, you know what? That's okay. It's okay to think that, but I still am not going to go and buy the Super Soaker 10,000. I mean, it might have been the great purchase when I was a child. But, and I think that there was, for me, I got to see all my cousins getting all those things. They got all those big things, and I didn't. And I was like, am I not as good as them? Am I not as deserving? And so it's those little things that you don't think about, that they sit there. But, I do love the idea of uncovering them and starting to look at it, because, there's so many layers to all this stuff. But there was something that I'd seen, and I wanted to ask you about, like, financially cheating on yourself. What does that mean? What does it mean to financially cheat on yourself? Because I think I know what it means, but maybe I don't.
It's a lot of what we were just talking about. So we all set these lofty goals for ourselves, these things
Yes.
that we want to achieve and do, and all of these things. And then we do behaviors around money that are contradictory to
Yeah.
those things. And then we get mad. We're like, well, this money stuff, this doesn't work. I'm always going to stay stuck, or I'm always going to stay broke, or I'm not good with money, right? So it's the cheating on ourselves. We set these promises and these goals and these ideas, and then we almost self sabotage them in a
Yeah.
way. And then we blame it on money. And I'm not downplaying the fact that there are so many people struggling to pay their bills. That
Yeah.
absolutely is a reality. But there's actually a lot more in our control that
Yes.
we can do. Like, I love what you were just talking about, that story about the Super Soaker, and what you created for yourself was brilliant. You gave yourself a pause. And that's what I like to talk about, is give yourself this pause, and you actually thought through, oh, wait a minute. I didn't get this as a kid. Wait a minute. Okay, is this still tied to my identity, or is this something I can kind of let go of, right? And so I like to talk about, our money story is this collection of how we learned about money, and it's our story up to this day, and we can't change it. Like, you can't change the fact that you did not get those things as a child. You can't. But going forward, I like to talk about writing what I call a money hero story. So this is the
Oh.
story that you get to write going forward, of what you want your relationship with money to be, what you value around money, what is enough, how you spend your money, the commitments that you're gonna make to money, to your goals going forward. So it's a little powerful exercise that helps kind of shake you out of that, like, financially cheating on yourself
I
place, and
love that.
going, okay, what actually matters? Because I get some say and some control over this, and I get to decide if I want to buy that Super Soaker. And if I decide I want to buy that Super Soaker, knowing that I didn't get it as a child and so I feel like I deserve it, on the other side of buying that, I have to tell myself that I'm not going to shame and blame myself, because I already decided that was important to me, right? So it's making these commitments just like you would in any other relationship. It's showing up, it's bringing some TLC to the relationship, which we leave out of the equation. And then we all just feel messy and gross and lost around money.
Yeah, I love that. And the your money hero story is so awesome, such a great concept because I started envisioning like I loved campy old 80s like action and hero movies, where there was always this down on your luck person who's like, suddenly that dun, 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 like that Rocky type music
Yeah.
pops on and they're just like there's a training montage, and they're building up for the hero comeback, and I think that we don't always recognize that that can be us. There's this one great thing. I got to work this summer with Mel Robbins and on her awesome launch and be one of the community managers for that launch community, and it was great. And I remember one of the things that Mel said in the podcast was there was this, what if everything turns out? What if everything works out? What if this is gonna go right? We so often is this even a word? I think it is catastrophizing, where
Oh, yeah.
you immediately go toward, oh, this is things are gonna go south, and why? Because maybe it did in the past. Maybe there's some of that money story where someone was waiting on something and it didn't come. But we have two things going for us. One is there was this great quote that I saw, and I always slaughter quotes on here, but it was like talking about people hoping for something better or, hoping that the universe helps them out. And it's like, work like nothing's going to come and help you, but then hope like it is, And so you put that effort in. And at the end of the day, we have a couple things. First of all, you have your optimism. Ryan, I think it's Eric Barker in the Barking Up a Tree. He's got this great book on success.
Okay.
And he talks about how optimistic, and it's all science-based. It's really cool. Optimistic people are more lucky. And part of it is because they believe they're lucky, they go out and get more opportunities. If you have this positive mindset and you can start going out there and trying to fix things, you're probably going to be able to. And the second thing is we have our dichotomy of control. You have the ability to focus on, all right, can't change that. That is out of my control. Did not need to get a flat tire today, but it came. And what can I do about it? I can go out and hustle up and make some extra money. I can make choices that are going to put me in a better space financially. There's always things that you can do. And so I love the idea of, the hero story always starts off with the hero making a choice to become the hero. That's part of the hero's journey. The hero, this jump from the known into the unknown. And then there's this choice. Like you can go back to the way it was. You can go back. Harry Potter could have gone back to underneath the stairway and said, I'm just going to stay here. Luke Skywalker could have gone back with Uncle, what's his name, and said, like, no, forget that. No lightsaber for me. But they didn't. They decided to embark upon a journey. And that when they embarked upon that journey, their life was changed, but they had to make the choice. And so, that talking about that hero's money story is speaking my language.
I love the choice because I think that's the piece around money we don't talk about is the amount of choice that we actually have. I think most of us just feel like we're being dragged around by
Right.
money. And I love that about optimism because in the book I talk about something called, I name it the money pipe. If you think about layers kind of stacking on top of each other. But it's this idea that your thoughts influence your feelings influence your actions, and then your actions influence your patterns and behaviors. So if we want to make a change around money, what most people do is they input you right in the action, right? Write a budget, save $1,000, whatever it might be. And you might get there, but then you fall off and then you get back and then you fall off, right? It's because we haven't changed the thoughts and feelings about that particular action. And so the optimism is beautiful. And it's not like you're going to walk around and like always be, money is so great. And I mean, it's not that, but what you're sharing in that story, I think, is that person is actually looking for
Yeah.
good things, right? And when we're looking for certain things, we all know this. Like, if you're wanting to buy a car and you are focused on a model, you're gonna see that car absolutely everywhere. Right?
Everywhere.
It's the same thing around money. Like, if we're looking for things going wrong, if we're looking for bad stuff around money, our bank account being too low, we didn't get the job or the contract, that's all we're going to see. And it really takes like a forceful effort, especially around money, to change that thought pattern. But those are things that one of the things that we hear so much is debt is bad, debt is bad, debt is bad. And I understand, I'm a money expert. I understand the consequences of debt. I understand how expensive debt is. I know it. I hear it. However, we actually get to choose how we think about that debt. So
Yeah.
it could be the story of, yeah, I'm in a lot of debt. However, that debt has helped put a roof over my head. It's paid for food for my kid. It's put me through school. It's paid my bills. It's whatever. It helped me start a business, right? We could actually change the meaning of that. And you know what happens when we do that is when we bring in like the debt payoff plan, we're actually more apt to do it because our
Yeah.
whole thought around it has changed. And so I really like can't overemphasize enough. Some of these things seem so simple, but they're so incredibly powerful.
Well, it's also the power of gratitude. Like you're tapping on that power of gratitude and of like the other day I was really upset about something. And I was just like, you know what? I really need to reframe this. And so I started trying to think about the positive aspects of the thing that was upsetting me. And I was like, you know what? Okay, this thing allowed me to have this. It allowed me to grow here and in this way. And then when that anger subsided, suddenly I was able to look at things more clearly. And I said, yeah, wow, I feel a lot freer to make decisions and choices because, you know, whether you believe in that, whatever you resist persists or not, if you start pushing back, it's going to be the only thing you see. And at some point in time, you have to face those monsters that float around in your head, because they're not always real. What what about this one? What are some of the biggest money myths that hold people back that you've seen?
Well, we've been talking about one of the biggest, and this is that money is just about the numbers, that financial
Yeah.
success is just about having more money. And that's not the case. I have worked with a lot of millionaires who live honestly paycheck to paycheck. So that myth has to just be completely blown out of the water. Another myth I think is another thing we're talking about is that you actually don't have any control, and you actually
Yeah.
have way more control than you think. Gosh, there's so many. I think another myth is a lot of people think I can't possibly be wealthy. Like I can't
Mm.
possibly get to that spot. And that comes back to my place of really defining what that is. What does that look like? Because if it's a
Yeah.
number, great. Then we have an action plan for how to shape and move your money. If it's a feeling, if it's a place you live, if it's right, if we actually get to define it, then we can create the plan around it. But if we don't
Hmm.
know what it looks like, yeah, we're just going to be running around banging our heads against the
Yeah.
wall. And, I've seen people that have come from very impoverished backgrounds who had no model for financial success, but really became super intentional about their money, really focused in on knowing their worth and advocating for pay raises and all of those sorts of things, and really changed the dynamic, created wealth, their version of wealth. And so it's super possible for anyone. I mean, can we all get to like Oprah level wealth? Probably not. But maybe you don't need that.
Yeah.
Maybe you need a much smaller version of that. And then I think the other money myth is that, again, you get to decide how you want to live your life. You get to decide how much money you want to make. You get to decide all of these things. And so if the society says, well, you have to save $1 million in order to be able to retire. Well, maybe that's not your reality. Maybe you need 2 million. Maybe you only need 250,000, right? There's so many different ways we can just shatter and break down a lot of these myths that we have just carried along around money. They're just old and tired. They don't fit anymore.
There's a couple things like too. It's like so much of that is very linear thinking. There was this one thing where buying a house is expensive. Not if you go to rural Japan, where they've got $20,000 houses, and like a really beautiful country where there's a different reality happening. Oh, you need this much to retire. Not if you move to Costa Rica, It's like there are different ways to look at things. And it's, again, for me, what's important for me? Be able to help people, being able to have stability for my family, being able to make sure that my daughter can get a good education. And you know what I would love? I'd love a place in the mountains, and I'd love a horse. I know that sounds weird and silly, and I know horses are an expensive thing, but maybe someday, and those little things that are different for each person, and you can't judge them. For one person, it's that they want that custom car. For another person, it's their video games. I used to judge people who played too many video games, but then I suddenly got to the point to realize, like, you know what, their reality is not mine. And maybe I'm super type A, but that might be a problem of my own that I have,
I hear you on that one.
Right? Well, how can we break the cycle? How can we break the cycle that of these money patterns and start seeing things differently?
One of the best ways of breaking this is by asking yourself a lot of questions. So I always say, dig deep, right? Ask yourself like 7 whys. So if I'm nervous every time I deal with money, why is that? Okay, maybe something happened in the past. Okay, what does that mean? Okay, why did that happen? Okay, what does that mean, right? So I'm always trying to get down to the foundation. And I think there's this fear of bringing more awareness around why we make the decisions we make.
Yeah.
Because it feels like, wow, there's already so much shame and blame around money. Like, I don't need to do it to myself even more. But it's, again, how we frame it, right? So if it's framed from a curiosity, I'm trying to learn and grow myself. I'm trying to be a better human. I don't want money thoughts to consume me 24/7.
Right.
It's a necessary process. So I love journaling. That's something that really works for me. And I have this practice. I call it a hey money letter. And every night I write money a letter based on what happened to the day. And I tell it what I think about it. Some days it's like, you were mean. I don't like you. I'll see you tomorrow. Sometimes it's like, hey, I had a great day. Thanks for showing up. I had a beautiful meal with my family. It's so fantastic. I'm glad we're in this great relationship. Blah, blah, blah. You make this your own. But it's communicating with it in a way that feels empowering, but also feels like you can just get gunk off your chest when you need to. And, you can borrow any of the little exercises and practices that we've talked about in this episode, make them your own. I know they might seem silly, but they actually really work. So we've got to get the gunk out of us. And the first step is to be honest with ourselves and saying, whoa, gunk is showing up. Where is that coming from? And then, do I need it? Like, is it factual? You mentioned this earlier. I was like, is this actually true? Right? So if I look at, like, maybe my saying is I'm always bad with money. Well, that can't be true, because you pay your bills, you go buy lunch, you pay your rent or your mortgage. So you're not bad with money. Maybe you've made a couple choices that you're not exactly satisfied with, but you're not bad with money. So let's find the evidence that's opposite, so we can show ourselves that's actually not true. Whoa, okay, I need to change that thought pattern because that one doesn't work anymore. And So I think it's just this exploration, it's this curiosity with yourself and understanding that money is outside of yourself. It's probably the longest relationship you're ever going to have in your life. So why not spend time to actually cultivate something that is a lot healthier, and that doesn't need the level of stress and anxiety that we bring to it?
I love that. Let me ask you one last question, and it's tied to this, but if you could go back in time to a younger version of yourself and take one big idea from your book, what idea would you teach your younger self?
Oh, so many of them. Um,
Right?
the big idea is that my self-worth is not tied to the amount of money in my bank account. I grew up believing that status, buying things, and displaying them brought a sense of you being a worthy human. And I have spent money on a lot of things that I
Yeah.
probably should have made better choices, but I did them because I thought, oh, it'll make me look good, or oh, I've got to have the fancy car, oh, all of these things. And, I wish that I would have had enough self love, really, I think, to be able to say to myself, I don't actually think I want these things. Create that pause moment and look at, well, where does this come from? Why do I think this way? And allow myself to make different choices than I was just kind of automatically programmed to make.
Yeah. I love that. I think that so often we are on autopilot, and I think it's about turning the lights on. I remember there was this one book that my dad gave me years ago, and the central concept was that we need to turn on the lights, to turn on the
Yeah.
lights in our lives, because if you are walking through the world in the dark, you are always reacting. You are always bumping your toe on something. You are always going to be like, wow, I didn't see that coming. But it's as simple as turning the lights on, because when you turn the lights on, you go from reactional to intentional. And when you can be intentional, the world is your oyster. The world is yours to explore and to play with. And again, it doesn't mean that you're going to be a billionaire. It might mean that you simply chart a course toward what's important for you. For you, maybe it's being completely debt free. For another person, maybe it's being able to afford those, once a month massages. Whatever it might be is important for you, but you have to have the lights on. And
I
it's
love that.
something that's a process.
I love that. Yeah, and I love that you're helping turn the lights on for a lot of people.
I hope so. I'm turning the lights on for myself, and that's a good starting point. And
That
I
is
think
the
if I
best.
can turn them on for my daughter, then we can keep moving from there, and we'll see what else can come of it.
For sure. For sure. I mean, that's the human experience, right? Is
Yeah.
it's all about trying to turn the lights on for ourselves and for other people.